Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey. Today's daf in the Dirshu Daf Yomi Bahalacha is Tzadik Hey Amid Bey. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Pesach. We've been discussing the laws of Sefiras HaOmer. We pick up today in the middle of Siman Taf Pei Tes with Sif Gimel on the top line of Tzadik Hey Amid Beis. So the Mechaber says, HaMispalel im hatzibur mi ba'od yom. If somebody is davening Ma'ariv b'tzibur, is davening together with the tzibur, mi ba'od yom, while it is still day. Now, I'll just give you a heads up and let you know that the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that according to most Achrayim, when the Mechaber says over here that you're davening mi ba'od yom while it's still day, he means that you're davening bein hashmashos. So you're davening during that time period, let's say between Shkia and Tzeisak Chavim, or at least for sure, between 15 minutes before Tzeisak Chavim and Tzeisak Chavim, but we're davening during the time period of Bein Hashmashos. And if you remember, yesterday we learned that really during Bein Hashmashos, there is a tzad to say that you could be Yotzei Sefiras HaOmer during Bein Hashmashos, because we said yesterday, it would be on Tzadik Hey Amid Aleph. Yeah, there goes the choo-choo train again. Wait 1 second. We said yesterday in Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Yud Daled, we said that even though the Shulchan Aruch says that the medaktikim, those that want to be Mekayim mitzvahs well in the proper way, the medaktikim wait to count Sefiras HaOmer until after Tzeisak Chavim, the Mishnah Berurah did say that there's good reason to say that you could fulfill the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer during Ben Hashmashos. Why? Because Ben Hashmashos is Safik Yom, Safik Laila. And according to most Paiskim, Sefiras HaOmer Bizman Hazeh is only D'Rabbanan. Safik D'Rabbanan Lekula. So in a D'Rabbanan, we could say that the suffix, Safik Yom, Safik Laila, we could figure that Ben Hashmashos is already Laila. And if you counted Sefiras HaOmer, you're Yotzei. So now the Mechaber is saying, if somebody was davening Ma'ariv together with the tzibur during Bein Hashmashos, he could count Sfira together with the tzibur without a bracha, and then if he remembers later after Tzeisak Chavim, Yevarech v'yispar, then he could make a bracha of Al Sefiras HaOmer later after Tzeisak Chavim and count during the proper time after Tzeisak Chavim. So now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Tezayin and get a little bit of a better understanding of exactly what's going on here. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Yesh me'achrayim, there are those achrayim, and he brings this down here from the Taz and the Gra, and the Pri Megadim says that the Magen Avram learned this way as well. Yesh me'achrayim shepershu, there are the achrayim that explain the words of the Shulchan Aruch here. When the Shulchan Aruch says that you're davening Ma'ariv mi ba'od yom, tahainu bein hashmashos, that he's referring to somebody who's davening Ma'ariv with the tzibur during bein hashmashos, to whose Safik Laila, which is Safik Yom, Safik Laila, the Yotzin Az Yedei Sfira, and at that time you could fulfill the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer, La Paiskim de Sfira Le de Sfira Bizman Hazeh D'Rabbanan, according to the Paiskim who hold that Sefiras HaOmer nowadays is only a din D'Rabbanan. Oh, now he's davening with the tzibur during Ben Hashmashos. According to the Paiskim, that Sfira is a mitzvah D'Rabbanan, he could be Yotzei Sefiras HaOmer now. So let him count now without a bracha. Now, why isn't he counting now with a bracha? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Achein, who writes a ledaktek, this person who's davening Ma'ariv Ben Hashmashos, he's from the medaktikim that we spoke about yesterday. He wants to be medaktek and he wants to fulfill the mitzvah properly. Achein, who writes a ledaktek, the lispar mitzvah hakachavim, the chanal. He really wants to wait to count Sefiras HaOmer until after Tzeis, because he wants to be Mekayim the mitzvah properly. The Ka'amar HaMechaber, and therefore the Mechaber is giving him an Eitzah Tova. The Ka'amar HaMechaber, and the Mechaber says, Tehu Yimnei Ma'em, he should count together with the tzibur now during Ben Hashmashos without a bracha. Pen Yishkach Acharkach, because he's going to go home, and for all of his good intentions that he wants to count Sfira after Tzeis, maybe he'll forget. And we don't want that to happen. If he'll forget, he won't be Yotze the mitzvah at all. So rather, the Mechaber says, count now together with the tzibur without a bracha. V'yachshav b'daitoi, and have in mind, im ezkar achar kach balayla limnois, if hopefully I'll remember later after tzeis to count, then einani roitza lotzeis b'sfirazu. Then I don't want the counting that I just did now during Ben Hashmashais. I don't want that counting to be effective. I don't want to use this counting to be Yotze the mitzvah. Like the Ramah is going to say that we could use such a tonight. Valkain, and therefore, Kishiyagia Hazman Achakach, when the Zman comes later, when Tzeis HaKechavim comes, Yevarech, he can make a bracha, V'yisbar, and he could count then. And it's not a bracha levatala because he wasn't Yotze the mitzvah before. Vayin bir halacha. Okay. So the Chavetz Chaim over here, in this ice cotton, he's learning like these Achrayim, who say that the Mechaber is addressing a case over here where somebody is davening Ma'ariv during Ben Hashmashos. This person is a medaktik b'mitzvahs, so he doesn't want to count Sefiras HaOmer during Ben Hashmashos. Because yes, according to some shittas, you could be Yotze Sefiras HaOmer during Ben Hashmashos, but the Mechaber said yesterday that the medaktikim don't rely on that. So he wants to be a medaktik. He wants to count Sefira properly after Tzeis HaKechavim. So the Mechaber tells him, Eitza Tova. Don't just ignore the tzibur and not count together with the tzibur during Ben Hashmashos, because there is a chance that you're going to go home and you're going to forget, and then you'll miss a night of counting. So instead, count now together with the tzibur without a bracha. But have in mind that should I remember later after tzeis to count Sefira, I don't want this counting to count. I don't want this counting to be used to be Yotze the mitzvah, and I'll make a bracha after tzeis, and I'll be Yotze the mitzvah properly. But if I forget and I don't count later, then this counting will save me. This counting will be my counting for tonight. Now, interesting, the Dirshu brings down over here, Dirshu footnote number 51, brings down a very famous Rabbi Kiva Eger. Midin zel lamad agayin Rabbi Kiva Eger, and this is brought down in the Rabbi Kiva Eger's Gilyonos, the Hagayis Rabbi Kiva Eger, earlier on in Siman Mem Vav Sivkatan Tezayin. Shemisha Baba Boker LeBeis HaKnesses. Let's say somebody comes to Shul Shabbos morning. V'yarei Shema Kriyishma Shel HaTzibur Tihya Acharei Zman Kriyishma. Let's say he davens in a nice shtibel where davening starts at 9 o'clock. And Zman Kriyishma is 9:20 or 9:25. And he's not sure if they'll finish Psukei de Zimra and he'll start Berachas Kriyishma. He's really not sure if when the tzibur hits Kriyishma, it's still going to be before Zman Kriyishma. What should he do? Yikra Kaidam Atfila. He should say Kriya Shema before davening, v'yisne, and he should do it with a tonight. She'im kishayikru atzibur yava zman Kriya Shema. If by the time the tzibur gets up to zman Kriya Shema, it gets up to Kriya Shema, it'll be after the zman. Then ani writes a lot says Kriya Shema zu shekra kais. Then I want my Kriya Shema that I'm saying now before davening. I want to use that Kriya Shema to be mekayim the mitzvah. V'im lav. But if the tzibur gets up to Kriya Shema before zman Kriya Shema, any writes a lot says Kriya Shema zu. Then I don't want to use this Kriya Shema that I'm saying before davening to be Yotze the mitzvah. Ela b'Kriya Shema she'ekrei matzibur. I want to use the Kriya Shema that I'm going to say with the brachas together with the tzibur. So the Rabbi Kiva Eger is throwing out the idea the same way with the Shulchan Aruch is saying that we could count Sefiras HaOmer on it tonight. That I'm going to count Sefiras HaOmer during Ben Hashmashos with it tonight. If I remember to count after Tzeis, then this Sefira shouldn't count. But if I forget, then this Sefira should count. We could do the same thing with Kriya Shema. Why would you do it with Kriya Shema? Because you would rather be Yotze the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, saying it at the right time and davening together with the brachas. Why should I do it b'di'evet, say Kriya Shema without the brachas before davening in order to be Yotze the mitzvah? I'd rather be Yotze the mitzvah with the Kriya Shema in Berchaisel. So the Rebbe Kiva Eger says, do it with it tonight. So that's where he learns this idea from. Now, that's the way the Mishnah Berurah, and that's the way the Chavetz Chaim in the Mishnah Berurah learns this mechaber. Now let's take a look at a Bir Halacha. The Bir Halacha says that there's a whole different way that we could learn this mechaber. Says the Bir Halacha in Dibra Maschil Mi Ba'od Yomi. Ayin the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatan Tezayin. Look at the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatan Tezayin. where I learned pshat that the mechaber is talking about somebody who's davening during ben hashmashos. Umashma mehem, it's implied by these achrayim, the miplaga mincha l'kulei alma eina yachal limnos. What are these achrayim saying? These achrayim are saying that the mechaber is addressing a case where the tzibur is counting the Omer during ben hashmashos. That's why you could count together with them without a bracha, and you could rely on that counting b'di'evet. If you forget to count later, you could rely on this counting. But if the tzibur is counting even earlier, let's say the tzibur, I'm sorry, bear with me just 1 second here. I want to turn my ringer off. No. If the tzibur is counting even earlier than ben hashmashos, let's say the tzibur is counting after plag. So it's before ben hashmashos, but it's after plag mincha. How about if they're counting then? Mashma mehem, it's implied by these achrayim who say that the mechaber is addressing a case of ben hashmashos to be plag mincha l'kolei alma eina yachal limnos. Nobody would say that you should count Sefiras HaOmer together with the tzibur after plag before shkia. The da, but you should know. The yesh harbe achrayim, there are many achrayim, the Lavush, the Eliyah Rabbah, the Chait Yaakov, the Maimon Mordechai, Nahar Shalom, the Mefarshim in Ba'od Yom, that they explain the mechaber, that when the mechaber says that this fellow was counting was davening marav with the tzibur mi ba'od yom, hainu mi plag mincha l'mayla. He means even after plag. He means before ben hashmashos, when it's really during the day. So then why does the mechaber say count with the tzibur? What point is there in counting with the tzibur if the tzibur is counting so early? It's certainly not night. How could they count Sefira for the next day at such a time? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. And this that the mechaber says count with the tzibur mi ba'od yom, hainu mishum ta'afal gav de me'ikar adin kol zman she'enoi laila enoi zman Sefira. Even though me'ikar adin, certainly this time period is not night, and therefore there's really no point in counting Sefira. Ukedala'el b'sef hakaidim, like we said in the previous sif, you can't count Sefira during the previous day. Mikam makayim, nevertheless, yesh mekaimos, there are those places shenagu lahakel bazeh, who ruled very leniently in this. Mishum shahayu regilin lehispalel ma'ariv kaidim chashecha. Why did they rule this way? Because in these locales, the minig was to always daven ma'ariv early. You know, some people make Shabbos early. When they make Shabbos early, so what do? They daven mincha before plag, and they daven ma'ariv very early. So in places where they daven ma'ariv early, if they're davening mincha before plag, and they're davening ma'ariv after plag, so you had areas where they always davened ma'ariv early. They always davened ma'ariv after plag, but before shkia. The chashishu, and therefore they worried. She'em lo yisperu az b'tzibur. There goes the train again. In these places where they were accustomed to always davening ma'ariv before shkia, they were worried that if they're not going to count Sefira when they daven ma'ariv, v'yelchu kalecha the beisai, and everybody is going to go home and they're going to have to remember to count Sefira later, yishkechu machmas tirda, all of these people are going to forget to count Sefira because they're going to be tired, they're going to be busy with other things, v'lo yisperu, and they're not going to count, v'tispatel ikar Torah Sefira, and the whole mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer chas v'chalila is going to become forgotten. And therefore, in these places, because of pressing circumstances, they relied on those shittas that say the besfira bizmanazeh, that in beneger to the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer nowadays, shuhu rak zeicher lemigdash, which is a derabanan, and it's only a zeicher to the counting of the Omer in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. L'roiv hapaiskim ein lahachmer b'yoser mimikri shma'u tefillah. If the whole Sefiras HaOmer is only a zeicher lemigdash, so then these shittas held, why are we being so machmer? Do we have to be more machmer on Sefiras HaOmer than we are on Kriya Shema and on Tfilas Ma'ariv? We let people say Kriya Shema, we let them daven Ma'ariv after plag before shkia. So we're going to be so machmir by Sefiras HaOmer, and we're going to say that you cannot count Sefiras HaOmer before Shkia. So now we're never going to count Sefira b'tzibur. Everybody's going to have to remember to count Sefira when they go home. Chas v'chalila, the whole mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer is going to be forgotten. So this was the basis why in a lot of places they taka always counted Sefira b'tzibur even before Shkia. The Kevin the Chashvi Zois Laschalas Halayla, since they were counting the time period before Shkia after Plag as the beginning of the night, the Kairin Shema, they were saying Kriya Shema Shalayla, Mispalal and Myriv, and they were davening Myriv, Kamoikain Yesh Lanu Lashav Lalayla Indian Sfira. So they also considered it night in Benagayat in the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. The Ka'amar, and because of that, the Mechaber says over here, Ta'af Misha Hu Talmud Chacham, even a person who's a Talmud Chacham, who's a medaktik b'mitzvahs, if he happens to be worried, Shema Yitared, maybe he'll become busy. The Yishkach Lispar b'yechidus, and he'll forget to count Sefiras HaOmer b'yechidus. Yachal Lispar im hatzibur, he's allowed to count Sefiras HaOmer together with the tzibur, even before Shkia, after Plag. Ach, lo yavarich al kol panim, but certainly he shouldn't make a bracha. The Me'ikar Adin ain't Zman Sfiras, because Me'ikar Adin, this is not a proper time for Sefiras HaOmer. You can't make a bracha. Ela shaloi machinan b'minig oisan ha'makayimais. Just, we're not moicha against the minig to count Sfira at that time. Ukadei shaloi yispatu l'gamri mi mitzvazu, so that the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer shouldn't become bottle. Ukishiagia hazman balayla, and when Tzesek Echavim does come, Yavarech v'yispar, then he should make a bracha and count. There ain't a bracha l'vatala, and it's certainly not a bracha l'vatala. The Sfira kamais alav klumhu meikardina, because the earlier Sefiras HaOmer that he counted before Shkia was b'chalal not a real Sefiras HaOmer. It's too early in the night. It's not night at all. So since that Sfira is not a Sfira at all, it's certainly not a bracha l'vatala, and you certainly can make a bracha later. So just to encapsulate what we've learned here, we have the Mechaber. The Mechaber tells you if you're davening Ma'ariv early and you want to count Sfira with the Tzibur, the Mechaber says you should count without a bracha, and then later on after Tzeis, you could count again with a bracha. Two pshatim in the words of the Shulchan Aruch. We have the pshat that the Chavetz Chaim says in the Mishnah Berurah in the name of Rav HaAchrayim. That pshat is that the Mechaber is addressing a case where a person is counting Sefiras HaOmer together with the Tzibur during Ben Hashmashos. If that's pshat, then what the Mechaber is telling you is, since the Tzibur is counting Sefiras HaOmer during Ben Hashmashos, and since, according to some Shitas, you could be Yoitza the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer during Ben Hashmashos, so count with the Tzibur without a bracha. Have in mind that I want to count Sfira later after Tzeis, and if I remember to, so then this counting that I did now should not count, and therefore I am able to make a bracha later because I had in mind that this counting shouldn't count. And if I forget later, so then I was covered by this counting, because b'di'eved, at least a counting during Ben Hashmashos is effective. That's the pshat that the Chavetz Chaim learns in the Mishnah Berurah. Here we have the pshat that the Chavetz Chaim mentions in the Biur Halacha. That pshat is that the Mechaber is not talking about Ben Hashmashos. The Mechaber is talking about really miba'id yom, really while it's still day. It's after Plag, it's before Shkia. It is certainly day, and it is certainly not a proper time for Sefiras HaOmer. And you certainly can't be Mekayim the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer during this time. So in that case, why is the Mechaber telling you to count? The Mechaber is telling you to count together with the Tzibur because the Tzibur had an important minig. What was the minig of the Tzibur? In this locale, the Tzibur always davened Ma'ariv early. They always davened Ma'ariv before Shkia. So now, if they're not going to count Sfira when they daven Ma'ariv, that means that there will no longer be such a thing as counting Sefiras HaOmer b'Tzibur. If there's no such thing as counting Sefiras HaOmer b'Tzibur, hundreds of people are going to forget to count Sefiras HaOmer, and Chas v'Chalila, the whole mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer is going to become forgotten. So therefore, they allowed the Tzibur to count Sfira without a bracha, miba'oid yom, during the day, in order to save the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. And the Mechaber is telling the Talmud Chacham, who certainly wants to go home and intends to be Mekayim the mitzvah in the proper way to count later, he's telling him, you should still go ahead and count together with the Tzibur, because you might forget. So no, go ahead and count together with the tzibur. The tzibur is doing it, and it's only a zeichel hamikdash. You might as well do it with them. But certainly later you have to count. Okay. Now let's take a look at the Ramah. Let's see what the Ramah's reaction is to what the Mechaber said over here. Hagah. Says the Ramah, Va'afilu ana amen al birkas hakol. Let's say this fellow was davening. Let's go with the pshat of the Mishnah Berurah now. Let's say, like the Mishnah Berurah said, he davened Mariv with the tzibur during Ben Hashmoshes, and the Chazan, after Kaddish Tiskabel after Shemona Esrei, he made the bracha Shekidishanu b'mitzvahs of Itzivanu al Sefiras HaOmer, and this fellow said Amen to the bracha. Says the Ramah, Va'afilu ana Amen al brechas hakahal, even if you answered Amen to the bracha of the Shliach Tzibur of al Sefiras HaOmer, im haya daitoi shaloi lotzes, if you had in mind, when you said Amen to the bracha, you had in mind, I'm saying Amen to the bracha, and now he's going to count. Remember, the Mechaber said, count Sefira together with the Tzibur. So you're there by the Tzibur. You heard the Chazan say, Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvahs of Sivanu al Sefiras HaOmer. You said Amen, and then you said, Hayoim Yoim Echad ba'Omer. Says the Ramah, even though you said Amen to the bracha of the shots, and you counted with the Tzibur, you said Hayoim Yoim Echad ba'Omer, still and all, says the Ramah, if when you did your counting, if when you said you had intent that you should not be yoitza the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer, yachzar v'yavarech v'yispar b'layla. Later on, if the Tzeitzak Echavim, you could make a new bracha and you could count, and there's no problem. Now, before we even go to the Mishnah Berurah, let's go to the Biur Halacha. Biur Halacha dibra maschel va'afilu ana amen. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ritzaynai loymar. What the Mechaber means to say over here is, Tahaya min hagam, their minig was, Shashliach tzibur haya mevarech umoitzi kal hakal biberchasai. Their minig was not like our minig. Our minig is, the Shatz makes a bracha shekidishanu b'mitzvahs of Itzivanu al Sefiras HaOmer. He counts the Omer, and then everybody else makes their own bracha, and everybody else counts the Omer. That was not the minig in those days. The minig in those days was that the Shatz made the bracha, everybody said Amen, and they were yoitze with the bracha of the Shatz, and then they counted. So the Shatz said Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvahs of Itzivanu al Sefiras HaOmer, everybody said Amen, and everybody counted. Hayom Yom Echad ba'Omer. But they did not make their own bracha. Now, this fellow who's counting Sefira together with the Tzibur early, but he wants to count again later, he looks like everybody else. He said Amen to the bracha of the Shatz, and he counted Sefira. Is he still allowed to count Sefira later with a bracha? Says the Biur Halacha, yes. Ritzaynai loymar. Tahaya min hagam shashliach tzibur hayam avarchu maiti kal hakol b'chasai v'asefira hayamayni kal echad la'atzmai. Therefore, we might have thought, since he said Amen to the bracha of the Shatz, so definitely, it looks like his kavana is just like everybody else. His kavana is, he said Amen to the bracha. That means he wants to be yoitze with the bracha of the Shatz, and then he counted. It certainly looks like he had in mind to be yoitze the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. So maybe later he can't make a bracha. It's a bracha levatala. Kamash malan, the Mechaber teaches us the loyam rinan hachi, that no, we don't say that. Kevan chekivein behedya shaloi lotzes. Since he clearly had in mind not to be yoitze the mitzvah, therefore it's okay, and he could count later with a bracha, and it's not a bracha levatala. Now let's take a look over here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cotton yud zayin. Ice cotton yud zayin. Ice cotton yud zayin. So the Ramah said over here that even though he made a bracha, hold on one second, please. I'm sorry. I will be right back with you. Bear with me. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that little interruption over there. Okay, So the Ramah said, even though he said amen to the bracha of the shots, since he had kavana, since he had clear intent not to be yoitza the mitzvah, he could count again later with a bracha. Says the Chavetz Chaim in Ois Katan Yud Zayin, Shaloi Lotzeis, he had intent not to be yoitza. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'dafka im miskavein shaloi lotzeis. This is only true if he had clear kavana not to be yoitza the mitzvah. Avo bistama, but if he didn't have intent, so he said amen to the bracha of the shots. He said ayom yom echad ba'omer. Now he goes home. Later, his son tells him, "Oh, Daddy, it's after tzeis. You can count Sefira now." He thinks to himself, "When I was in shul, I didn't have kavana not to be yotza." Says the Chavetz Chaim, "Avo b'stama yotza lemanda amar the mitzvah is ein tzrichas kavana." Certainly, according to the opinions that hold that mitzvah is ein tzrichas kavana, that you don't need clear intent to be Mekayim a mitzvah in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah. So this person, he said amen, and he counted. So he was Yaitz the mitzvah. So he can't now go make a bracha. Even though we paskin lahalacha that mitzvah stricha is kavana, so l'chara, this person didn't have kavana to be Yaitz the mitzvah. So l'chara, he could make another bracha now. What's the problem? No, says the Chavetz Chaim. What are we talking about over here? Over here, we want to let a person make another bracha later after Tzesek Echavim. He's going to say the Shem Shamayim. He's going to say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. He's going to say the Shem. So we can't allow him to go say a Shem. We can't allow him to go make a bracha if there's a tzad that it's a bracha of Atala. Tzarech lachash lahakdeya. We have to be concerned. We have to go with the shita that mitzvah ain't tzrichas kavana. Right? Because we have to be machmir. He's going to say a shame. Bracha levatala is a very, very stringent thing. So we can't allow him to go make a bracha. The only time we could allow him to go make a bracha is if when he said amen to the bracha with the tzibur, and he counted with the tzibur, he had kavanah, I'm not being yaitza. Then, since he had kavana that he's not being yaitza, he can make a bracha later. But if he didn't have kavana that I'm not being yaitza, then according to the Mount Yomer mitzvah saying tzrichas kavana, he was yaitza the mitzvah. So now he can't make another bracha later. It's a tzad of a bracha levatala. Okay, a little bit of a complicated sif. Let's go now to sif daled. This is a famous halacha that everybody knows. Mi sheshayaloi chaveroi bein hashmashos. Let's say your friend asks you during Bein Hashmashos. Now let's stop right over there. Let's go to the Mishnah Berurah cutting your test. Bein Hashmashos, not got Bein Hashmashos. The reason the Mechaber mentions over here Bein Hashmashos, Mishum de B'diavad im Birach Bein Hashmashos Yotza v'Chanal, because we've already seen over and over again that there's at least those shitas that hold that you could be Mekayim the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer during Bein Hashmashos, like we've seen previously. But the halacha that the Mechaber is about to say, this halacha that the Mechaber is going to say certainly applies if this happens after Tzesek Echavim. What does the Mechaber say here? Let's say your friend asks you during Ben Hashmashos, what number are we supposed to count tonight? What night of the Omer is it? What are we supposed to count? You should respond to him, yesterday was the so-and-so day of the Omer. But do not say to him, tonight is the 22nd night of the Omer. Shem yomerloi, because if you will say to him, hayoim kach v'kach, today is the 22nd day of the Omer, now you're not going to be able to count Sefira with a bracha. You know why? Because you were just yaitz the mitzvah, Sefiras HaOmer. Like I just read to you in the Chavetz Chaim. During Ben Hashmashos, already according to many shitas, you could be Mekayim the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. So if somebody asks you during Ben Hashmashos, what's today in the Omer? And you tell him, today is the 22nd day of the Omer. Well then, according to those shitas, you were just Mekayim the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. Now you can't make a bracha. It would be a bracha levatala. Certainly, like I read in the Chavetz Chaim, this is certainly true if the guy asked you what day it is after Tzesek Echavim. Then you could certainly be Mekayim the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. So you have to be careful how you answer. Aval, but on the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber continues, Aval Kaidem Ben Hashmashas, but if this happens before Ben Hashmashas, happens 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Kevan She'ein Zman Sfira, since that's certainly not an appropriate time for counting the Omer, Ein Bekach Klum, that's not a problem. So if your friend asks you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, what are we counting tonight? And you tell him, oh, tonight is the 22nd day of the Omer. That's certainly not accounting because it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But if it happens during Ben Hashmashas, or certainly if it happens after Tzeisak Echavim, that would be problematic. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Yud Tes. Oh, we just read Yud Tes. Now, Ice cutting Chaf. The Mechaber said that you have to be careful not to respond Hayoim Kach V'Kach. The fellow asked you, what do we count tonight? You should not say tonight is the 22nd day of the Omer. That's the way the Mechaber put it. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Chaf. You should make sure not to say this even in English or even in another language, because you could be Yotze the Mitzvah that way. But but if you didn't say tonight is or today is less lanba, then it's not a problem. So if somebody asks you what night of the Omer is it tonight, and you say 22, that's fine, because you can't be Yotze the Mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer by saying 22. 22 what? 22 eggs? 22 what? You didn't say tonight is the 22nd night. You just said 22. Mishum de ikar mitzvah Sefiras HaOmer hu sheyomer hayom kach v'kach. In order to be yotze the mitzvah, you have to say hayom kach v'kach. Ice cut and chav aleph. If you do say tonight is the 22nd or today is the 22nd day, you're not going to be able to count with a bracha. The Omer ba'omer. Because even though you didn't say, look at the Mechaber. The Mechaber said you should make sure not to say Hayom Kach V'Kach. But it doesn't say Hayom Kach V'Kach Ba'omer. Says the Chavetz Chaim, even though you didn't say Ba'omer, Yotze B'Diavad. You're Yotze B'Diavad without the word Ba'omer. The Chanal B'Siv Ches. Ais Katan Chav Beis, Lachsav Limnois B'Bracha. If you said this, you're not going to be able to count together with a bracha. Shekvar Yotze B'Zei Sfira, because according to many opinions, you were already Yotze the Mitzvah Sefiras HaOmer. Lamad Omer Mitzvah Sein Tzarich Kavana. And again, like he keeps on saying, Va'afta Anan Kaimelon de Tzriches Kavana. Even though we paskin that mitzvahs do need kavana, so by just answering to your friend, oh, tonight is the 22nd night, Yuzika didn't have kavana to be yotze the mitzvah, so what are we worried about? And this person certainly didn't have intent to be becoming the mitzvah. But again, like the Chavetz Chaim said before, le'inyan bracha, since you want to go ahead and want to make a bracha with the shame, since you want to go ahead and you want to make another bracha with the shame, and there's a possible question of bracha levatala, tzarich lahachmir, we have to be very stringent, v'lachush lahachdeya, and we have to worry about the shita that holds that mitzvahs ain't tzrichis kavana, v'lo yavarich ala sfira sheyim nakakach, and therefore you can't make a bracha on the counting that you're going to do later. V'yesh oid eitza, the Chavetz Chaim says that there is another eitza, what to do if somebody asks you this question. If your friend comes and asks you, what are we counting tonight? And for some reason you don't want to just say 22, you want to tell him tonight is 22, you should have clear intent. I'm not being Mekayim the mitzvah. Kasva Achrayim, the Achrayim, right? The Mayri Shashar Loisai Kaidim Shahagia La Shavuos. Another cute thing. The Chavetz Chaim says that the Achrayim say over here that this whole shaila is only negeya before day 8, but day 1 through 7. I'm sorry, before day 7, but day 1 through 6 you don't have a problem. I'm sorry, the other way. That's when it's a problem. Only before day 7 when you already started counting weeks, when you didn't count weeks yet. If somebody asked you this on the 22nd day of the Omer, you don't have a problem. Why not? Because even if you tell him, oh, tonight is the 22nd day of the Omer, lav klumu, that's not an effective counting. Because he asked you, what's tonight? And you told him, oh, tonight is the 22nd day of the Omer. But you didn't say, tonight is the 22nd day, which is 3 weeks and 1 day of the Omer. So your counting wasn't a good counting anyway, because you didn't count days and weeks. You only counted days. So this only issue, the Achrayim say, is only day 1 through 6, because day 1 through 6, you don't have to count weeks. So if you say tonight is 5, you already ate to the mitzvah. The tzarich lazer v'lisper b'bracha. Okay, we're going to stop over here at the words of the Ramah. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The schos of Limud HaTorah should stand Gans Klal Yisrael in good stead. The Rebbeinu Shalom should chick Yeshuas and Refuas, and we should be zoichet to the Bias Goel Tzedek b'mher v'yameinu. Be well. Please don't do that.